Hi, everyone, and we're back with State Representative Charlie Kimbell. We're recording this on Saturday, April 23rd, and it's been a couple weeks. So, Charlie, how you doing? It's good to see you again.
Good. Nice to see you again, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Saturday morning after another busy week in the legislature, and now we're entering the last couple of weeks. The bets are now May 6th or May 13th for the end of the legislative session. So,
so you're still on that target.
We're still on the target. It seems like a lot has to be done between now and then. There's still a lot of disagreements over the budget. It's the economic development bill that we have, pension reform. We're actually in agreement, the House and the Senate, but not with the governor. The governor threw a late idea into it, which is to try to get public employees to have an option for a defined contribution plan instead of a defined pension plan. Which is not in the agreement that the legislature and a member of the governor's staff crafted with the unions representing the state and public employees, and the teachers union and also the state employees union. So that's a big deal, and we'll see. The governor is threatening to veto different bills, including the budget, which would be a big deal. But that could be a tactic, and it could actually be reality. He has done it in the past, so it's a credible threat. If he doesn't get what he wants, then he may veto the budget. So that's big. So we're working through that. A couple of bills that have passed recently. Yesterday in the House, we were passing a bill that deals with both a rental registry and a Vermont rental improvement program. And that puts $20 million into the rehabilitation of either non-code compliant units or accessory dwelling units. And this is an attempt to really deal with a housing shortage that we have, which is one of our biggest challenges in the state. And it wasn't a unanimous vote on this because there's a controversial provision, which is not the first time it's come through the legislature. And this is to create a registry of all rental units in the state. And then to set up an inspection system to inspect those units to make sure they are, code compliant. And there are a lot of units that are not throughout the state. So this is really an attempt to both identify those rental units that are available for rent in case there's something like a Hurricane Irene and you're looking for people to, empty places to put people. But it's also to try to improve the quality of those units. Closely tied into that is this improvement program that provides money, grants of up to $50,000 per unit attached to it, as long as the owner of the property agrees to keep it affordable for at least 5 years. And that 5 years, during that 5 years, the landlord has to work with a housing agency, a local housing organization, to find housing for people that are currently homeless, or not finding someone that qualifies for that, for someone that is at 80% of the area median income. So the area median income right now is for Windsor County is about $61,000, $61,500, I think it is. So that means 80% of that is what, $49,000 in terms of area median income. So it's really trying to help those that need to have affordable housing. So the reason why it's not unanimous is a lot of people are objecting to the new 5 employees that would be stood up across the state. And it's the first state really to have a statewide enforcement of a rental registry. That's one piece. The second is it's $35 per year per unit to register your rental unit. And for some, that means that it's, boy, that adds an extra expense for the small landlord. But $35 per unit, when the average rental prices that we have, at least in Windsor County right now, a single unit apartment right now, single bedroom apartment is over $1,000 a month in many places. So you could justify saying $35 is not that much, but this is, a lot of folks fear that this is just another outreach of state government. But the reality is there's a lot of dilapidated properties that could use an upgrade. And there are people living in some pretty squalid conditions. That's the reason behind this bill. So that's $20 million. So that's pretty big. The other big issue coming through right now, and there's not universal agreement on this either yet, is universal school meals. So during the pandemic, the federal government gave us a lot of money, over $5 billion. And part of it was to provide schools with enough money to make sure everybody had a meal coming from the school, either breakfast and lunch, and that nobody would have to pay for it. So the idea behind this is good, and that you don't want to have a stigma attached to those that are qualifying for free and reduced meals. And that stigma does exist. You know the kids that are on assistance and need something, and the kids that don't. And often you can see that in the chow line at the dining hall or the cafeteria in the school. So there is universal meals does help to overcome that. The concern, of course, is that, well, then you're asking everyone to pay for the meals of people that can afford to pay for it anyway. So that's a real concern. And that also the idea is that this will cost about $29 million, and there's no funding for it, and no terms of funding from a permanent source. So it's taking excess money out of the education fund. It's a $95 million excess amount in the fund, and to use that money for this particular purpose. So if you've got the extra money, why not do it? Except that there's a lot of competing priorities. There's no money set aside to help communities with their new school construction. Woodstock is looking at a $73 million tab on its new school that's been proposed. $29 million that we're talking about for universal school meals won't solve Woodstock's issue, but it could certainly go towards paying some part of it. Every part is going to count. There's over $500 million worth of school construction projects identified throughout the state. So it's really hard to look at this, what I think is probably one-time money that's a surplus in the education fund. And then are you going to use it for universal school meals for just an extension of an existing program for a year? Or are you going to look at kind of investing in the future? So that's, I'm still up in the air a little bit about it. I recognize the thing about the benefits for universal meals and what that does for, the equity in terms of inside the schools, but there's also this huge need in terms of school construction. So that's a couple of really big deals that are coming through right now.
And do you want to touch on just where the various pieces of your rural economic development omnibus bill, where those sit?
Oh yeah, that's a big piece. We had their bill came over from the Senate. It's an Act 250 reform bill. That's how it's billed, and it's the number is S234. But it landed in our House Natural Resources Committee, and they took a lot of testimony. So there's a lot of the elements that we had looked for in our omnibus bill that are incorporated in that, which is really good. And also some of the priorities that we had set out for affordable housing and development and priority housing development in our smaller towns is in that bill. So we're really excited about that. The provisions for forestry products industry in terms of their Act 250 process have to consider the economic impact of the forestry products industry itself. So that's in there. Hours of operation for forestry products, that's great. Accessory on-farm business is a real controversial thing, especially up in Woodstock right now. But that is turned into a study to have the Natural Resources Board really look at the purpose of accessory on-farm business and if there's a way to provide more clarity. The bill that had come out of our caucus was really to have some specific clarifications around, does everything have to be produced on the farm? What's the size of the acreage that could be occupied by the accessory on-farm business? How much revenue? What's the size of the buildings? That kind of stuff. And the Natural Resources Committee said, there's too much here. What is the purpose of that accessory on-farm business? How does it fit? How does it fit within a 1 acre town versus a 10 acre town? There's that issue as well for Act 250 review. So they said, we need a deeper look at it. We just can't do it within the session. So that's gone that way. There was originally a proposal for, if you remember there used to be a thing in Act 250 that if you had a driveway that was longer than 800 feet, it would automatically trigger Act 250. And that was proposed to bring back into Act 250 trigger or jurisdiction. And the House Natural Resources took it out of the bill when it came over from the Senate. And based on they were able to identify other ways of trying to protect forest blocks and natural habitats rather than just use the road rule as a way to indicate that. And so that's real progress, I think, and that will, I think, be more acceptable to the governor. And we're all playing this game. All right, let's see it's not a game, I'm sorry. We're all playing the strategy of what is the governor going to accept, or what does he consider to be a poison pill in a bill that will cause him to veto it. So that's very much top of mind with every bill that we're discussing right now. Because as I said before, it is a real credible threat because he has vetoed more bills than any other government in the history of the state of Vermont.
Right. And depending on whether or not if you had the numbers to possibly overturn, you could extend the session even further out if you had to go into a veto session after May 13th, right?
Yeah, nobody wants to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, especially in an election year. And I mean, just to bear the real truth, I mean, we've got two people that are serving in the Senate that are running for the U.S. House. We've got people like me in the House that are running for statewide office or countywide office. And we the election for the primary is August 9th.
Right.
So that means it's a really short time period between when we get out of our session and when the election is held. So there's that motivation. And there's also, we don't want to cost the taxpayers more money and staying in session. It's expensive to have the legislature in session. And the longer we're in session, the more things that could be passed. So, and it just, the closing days of the session are times when there could be stuff slipped into a bill or two that everybody kind of loses sight of because they're focused on one particular thing. We don't want that to happen. So you definitely want to have your best work done when you're freshest. That's, yeah.
Sure, that makes sense. And speaking of it being an election year and with the primary coming up in August, which does not leave a whole lot of time for those who are legislators who are running for statewide office or otherwise. Are we back to sort of a normal type of election year in that we'll see in-person candidate forums and debates? Like, how is your race going, and what is planned leading up to August for the Democratic primary?
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's a real mix. I mean, tomorrow I'm going in a parade up in St. Albans, which that's what these are for, to say, hey, hi, how you doing? And there are a mix of in-person candidate events. I was up at UVM on.
I was at the Maple Festival, by the way.
Maple Festival, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's a good time.
It's a really fun event and brings in people from all over the state. So got to go to the Maple Festival. But and there's different places. I was at Vermont Technical College last week with a gathering of high school students from career and technical education centers. And so that, yeah, there is an increase, but there's also a lot of reluctance for some things. Participated in a Zoom forum for the Bennington City Democrats and another Zoom forum for somewhere else. And the rise of COVID cases right now has a lot of people concerned. About, is it safe to gather in person? We've got the highest incidence of COVID cases in the State House right now since we've
was that right?
Back. Yeah. So more and more members, like, suddenly they're not in committee, and it's like, ooh, okay.
Yeah.
And so that's, I've got something planned for June, and the right now it's scheduled to be on Zoom. Like, oh, come on, can we be in person? But it's open to retail politics. I'm going to diners, going to meet people in person, and that is the way to get to know people. And if you do it safely and smartly, then you're not going to be spreading the virus. Yeah.
Well, I was just wondering, because the last time around 2 years ago, we sort of missed out, I feel like, on not having as many forums and debates for a lot of these offices. So
yeah.
you know,
that's definitely true.
Yeah. So it sounds like there's a little more, and we're sort of getting back, but it's not quite where it was prior to COVID.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it has made it more efficient in some ways, but less effective. More efficient in the sense that I can do a meeting with folks up in Essex County and also in Bennington County in a 2-day time. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you actually had to drive, it'd be really difficult sure. In order to do those meetings and still try to legislate and hold down a job. So that's.
But in terms of like statewide media, do you have anything planned for, like, you know, is there a debate or a forum on VPR or Vermont PBS?
Yeah, 7 Days is doing a forum at the Paramount Theater in Rutland in June 18th, I think. And then the others are really just intra-party because it's the primary.
Right.
And you know, and folks in Vermont, they're really funny. It's an open primary. You don't have to register as a Democrat or Republican or an independent. So there's no registration, but people always forget that. Mm-hmm. It's like people tell me I'm a registered Democrat. It's like, actually, no, you're not, because we don't require that. Mm-hmm. And so people can vote across their party lines. When they go into the town clerks or request the ballot for the primary, and they can pick any ballot they want. Mm-hmm. And the frustration, I think, is when people come into the town clerk's office to vote in a primary and they want to vote in both primaries. Mm-hmm. And they can't. They have to choose one. Yep. Yeah, pick one. And most folks, if you're not a political nerd, then they don't pay attention to that. It's like, no, I want to vote in this primary for Congress and in this primary for lieutenant governor. You can't do that.
So I read something about redistricting. It sounds like that has been finalized. And there's a little bit of shift in Windsor County, but your district is staying intact.
Staying intact, yeah. There are some changes in Windsor County. The town of Rochester is now part of the senatorial district from Addison instead of from Windsor.
Right. And they lost some of the towns in the, I think Mount Holly is now in Rutland, and yeah. I think Windsor County gained Thetford.
Yes, Windsor County gained Thetford. You know, I like Thetford, but
Thetford's technically, is that Orange County?
Orange County, yeah.
Yeah, so it's a little confusing, but.
And the reps, the state rep district is Thetford and Norwich. Mm-hmm. It's a 2-member district. So we go across party or county borders and state representative districts already. Mm-hmm. So it is a little strange just to make the numbers work. Mm-hmm. You know, it's what we do. Yeah.
And your successor, so how's that shaping up? Do you know who's in the race for, is it Windsor 5, Woodstock-Plymouth-Reading?
Right. At this point, I don't know of anybody who's declared.
Huh.
Yeah. I hope somebody does come forward. You know, there's a strange thing in Vermont where you can run for one office, statewide office, and still run for your existing office. Mm-hmm. I'm not doing that. Right. So I hope somebody does step up. And
I mean, I don't know if that's ever happened, but what happens if nobody runs? I mean, does it get appointed?
Well, if nobody runs in the primary for either party, yeah, then their party gets to nominate someone to be on the general election ballot. Mm-hmm. Okay. And that has happened in other places. So I'm hoping that won't happen, mm-hmm. that someone who's really keen and interested. Again, it's only April. I remember when I ran my first time, I didn't declare my candidacy until I think late April. Mm-hmm. So now is about the time because petitions are due May 26th.
I was going to ask that. Okay. To get on the ballot for the primaries.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
And this week, were you in the chamber for the tribute to Senator Leahy?
I was. Yeah. That was great. It was the first time the House and Senate had been all together in the chamber with the governor and the lieutenant governor. And so that was really wonderful. It was all the right things about pomp and circumstance without the pomp and circumstance. So it was good. The governor gave a speech about the senators. So did the speaker. So did the president pro tem and the lieutenant governor. And he gave a talk, and it was really special for his nearly 50 years in office and what he's done for Vermont. And that's the amazing thing is how long he served in office and how much he has looked out for the state. the amount of his position as president pro tem, chair of different committees, the amount of funds that have come to the state because of his advocacy and his position has been incredible. So he put something in place called the small state minimum for any grant program that goes out, not to be based on population, but to be based on, as the smallest states should all get the same. So Vermont has benefited significantly from that, particularly with the round of financing for COVID relief.
Yeah.
So the fact that we've had over $5 billion and monies coming into Vermont from the federal government in the past 2 years has kept our economy really not only humming, but in some places growing, which in the face of a pandemic you wouldn't expect. There's still winners and losers, but the fact that he was able to provide that kind of financing is incredible. Mm-hmm. Yeah, been amazing.
Okay, well, Charlie, I think
yeah, that's good, huh?
About sums it up. I think. Yeah. I don't know. You tell me. Have you just summed it up?
No, that was that was really good in terms of everything that's going on. Those are the highlights. There's other stuff. We'll be having a lot of debate over the school weighting, and this is about funding public schools and how much weight is applied to each category of student. Because the state had a report done, 3 years ago at this point, to determine if the way the state was considering the education resources necessary for individual students was accurate. And the report came out and said, no, it's not accurate. It was arbitrary when it was adopted, and it doesn't reflect the true costs. So what's happened with a lot of schools is that they have feared getting into the overspending category. So because of those weights, it's really complicated, but the bottom line is that in order to provide the services that are needed by students in poor rural communities, and also those that are English second language learners, and those with other learning challenges, then it's more expensive to educate those students. And the school districts have been so mindful of maintaining the expenses below that excess spending threshold that they've ended up denying some of those students the education resources they deserve in order to equal the playing field. Because we've got this weird thing where kids come into school, hopefully at the time they come through pre-K, they're at the same starting line. And then they're not, depending on, and it's usually determined by the socioeconomic position of their household. And then in the first 4 years, what's going on with those students? Is the gap narrowing between those students in terms of academic performance and, how are they advancing, how are they developing? And we still see that in our school systems that gap does not close. So that points to some of the instruction necessary to help those kids that need the extra help in order to close the gap. And it's really complicated, but it really comes down to how can we provide those students who need the extra help with the extra help. Yeah, anyway, so that's the big issue that's coming up in the next 2 weeks.
Yeah, okay. So no shortage of important issues. And sounds like you have a ways to go, but that deadline, your target date of May 6th or May 13th will come up fast.
3 weeks. So, let's go. Yeah.
Rapid pace.
Yep.
Okay. Well, if you're willing to join us, maybe we could see you next week and give us another update. All right. You can fill us in on the diner tour as well.
Exactly. Yes. All right.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.